spam scanning occurs. So it's the same spam scanning infrastructure as what we had with Whiskmail. Uses.
We're not hearing it on the broadcast.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
All right. We're good now? All right. All right, so as I was saying, the spam scanning is the same as what we had for Whiskmail. And for those of you who are familiar with it, we tag the messages in the headers and then pass it along to Office 365. Outbound mail flow is actually similar. Before, when we send messages outside of the UW-Madison Office 365 service, the messages flow back through the Whiskmail servers. We do some scanning. We have the ability to trace the messages in our logs in case people have trouble sending mail. For sending mail, there's a few different points of egress into the system. If you're using an EWS client like Outlook or your mobile app, the messages will first hit Office 365 and then get delivered out to the Whiskmail servers. For those people who are using SMTP auth, which is a component of Whiskmail that still exists, a lot of IMAP client users continue to use SMTP auth because it performs better than Microsoft's SMTP server. Those messages get sent directly to the Whiskmail servers and then outbound to the internet. And similarly, for those of you who are using the relay service, if you have copiers or scanners, those are getting sent directly to the on-premises server. Those aren't going to Office 365 at all. And just so it's clear, mail that's sent between two Office 365 users stay within Office 365. Those don't go back to on-campus. And then also for this context, Wishlist and Google Groups are considered external to Office 365. So in that case, even though if you have a group of people that's in a Wishlist, even though they're all on Office 365, the messages will still travel back through the Whiskmail server over to Lyris for expansion, and then back inbound through the Whiskmail server, and then off to Office 365. So from a efficiency standpoint, there's a lot of hops going on there. And then finally, Office 365 groups are considered internal to Office 365. So within there, the messages stay within Office 365. They don't flow back to on-campus. All right. Any questions so far? Like I said earlier, our spam scanning servers tag messages in the headers, and this is an example of what it looks like in the headers. Are you guys all familiar with looking at the source of a message?
Is this PowerPoint online?
Yes, I can send it out after this.
Okay.
We're also streaming it,
Right.
and in theory, the video should be available to watch on YouTube. So we scan all the messages and we tag them in the headers with their spam score. And in Office 365, we look at that score. We have it configured to set the spam confidence level, which is an internal Microsoft concept. They do certain things at different levels, and the two levels we really care about here are either keep in the inbox or move to junk mail. And that translates to the SCL level of -1, which is keep in inbox, and 5, which would be put into junk mail. So if you look at the headers of one of your messages and you're wondering why it's in junk mail or in the inbox, you should see either -1 or 5. And I should note that if you see SCL of 6, I think that means that the person has that sender in their blocked senders list. So that would be a clue if your user's having issues with some messages getting filtered when they think they should not. And again, you can look at the X-Spam report header to be able to tell how Sophos rated it, and then if you're still seeing messages that contradict that messages flowing into a folder you don't expect, that should give you a clue. Your question?
Where would that block sender list be? Would that be on the email servers or on 365?
Right. So the question is, where does the block senders list exist? Is it on Whiskmail or Office 365? This is it's in Office 365. It's available to users in their options. If you go into the web client, up into the options, it's pretty easy to find. The block senders has no bearing on the spam score that gets assigned to the message. It's kind of like an override. Despite what the spam score says, filter this message anyway. That's kind of how it works. Okay, so another thing, as in the past, we've always recommended turning off client-side filtering. Here's how it looks in Outlook. It can be confusing to people because they think that it would make sense to turn those settings on, the low, high, or only from safe list. But you actually want it set to no automatic filtering. The reason why that's important is because the messages are already being filtered into junk, and Outlook will start looking at your already clean inbox and then start trying to filter more messages into junk, and then users get confused because their messages are being filtered even though they're being rated correctly by our servers. So from a user experience, we recommend people turning off client-side filtering to ensure that we can support them the best. And this applies to any client, like Thunderbird has built-in filtering. All right. You may have noticed that some users reported seeing an increase in spam during their transition to Office 365. It was a pretty common complaint that we got. It's not entirely clear why that happened, but here are some theories. During the transition to Office 365, we encouraged people to consolidate accounts. A lot of people had multiple accounts. So basically what we were doing at that point was taking two flows of spam, combining it into one account, and the users would see in their junk folder double the amount of spam, perhaps. I think that was a common thing that happened.
Was there a difference in how spam is dealt with in service accounts? Because we've noticed service accounts are tending to get more spam than non-service accounts.
So the question is, was there a difference in the way service accounts are handling spam scanning? No, they're identical. I think there could be differences at the individual account level. Perhaps maybe the address is published on a web page, so it attracts more spam that way.
Well, this was prior to the migration. There was a certain level of spam in service accounts. After the migration, there was more of an increase in some of our service accounts than in the person's corresponding Whiskmail account.
Right, so this would fall into that area where we would need to troubleshoot to see exactly what happened. And I think we might determine that it was one of these causes that happened. But certainly I would welcome any theories that, there could be a variety of factors, because a lot of things changed with the transition. Messages are flowing through different servers depending on where MX is pointing and all that. So we really would just need to look at the specific example to see where it's at. So the other possible causes would be, back on the old Whiskmail system, we allowed people to adjust their junk mail setting from high, medium, low, 7 different levels, I think.
We had a lot of people doing that.
Right. That wasn't really supportable for us on Office 365. We were only really able to set up a black and white type situation, or on or off, when it came to translating that spam score into the spam confidence level.
Probably what happened then. We had a lot of custom
junk
levels on the service accounts that we didn't have on the.
Yeah, so that might have been the cause for your situation. Similarly, we didn't migrate any of the block lists. Whiskmail had a block list concept. That wasn't really possible for us to migrate into block senders. So if people had a huge block list that was really good at catching whatever particular type of spam that was plaguing them, that might have been the cause. Same thing for our allow list too. If people had whitelisted a bunch of addresses, and then when they transitioned, they might have seen a lot of messages that were getting rated as spam, but they had those addresses in their whitelist to keep the messages flowing to their inbox. That might have caused some messages to go back into junk mail. Those users will need to recreate their block list and accept this. Similarly, custom filters. If they were using custom filtering to catch spam, those were not migrated, so they'll need to recreate those. Or it could have just been a coincidence. Spam does kind of have a cyclical nature. So, any other ideas from the field? I'm sure there's lots of possible reasons that users report different things happening. It's a very complex system. Oh, and Janet, this did make me think that if you wanted to try to filter messages at a higher spam rating, you technically could by setting up a custom inbox rule. And I'm going to touch on that in a future slide, so you could keep that in mind.
You have to set them all up again, basically.
Yeah, it's probably a pain, but if you have a particular user who just needs it, then you could do that. Okay, so reporting spam and reporting abuse. There are lots of ways to do it. They're slightly different. So Microsoft has a built-in feature called Mark as Junk. That's built into the web client, and it's built into Outlook. We don't recommend this. It does two things. It adds the sender to the block senders list, and I'm going to talk in the next slide about why that's problematic. And then it sends the message as an attachment to, well, it tries to send it to Microsoft, but we intercept the messages and send it to Sophos so that Sophos can train their algorithms to be more accurate. You will also see the report spam add-in that we added. That one only sends the submission to Sophos. It also contains some additional helpful information to the user.
Only in the web client?
That's in Outlook and the web client. It's not in, you wouldn't see it in an IMAP client. And you don't see it in the mobile clients either. If you really want to submit spam via those ways, there's an email address you can send to, and I believe that's documented in the KB. It's report-spam@wisc.edu. And that one is recommended. And the other thing that the report spam add-in has is a link to the place to report abuse to IT security. If there's someone on campus who's harassing or abusing resources, and you really want a person in security to pay attention to it and maybe take action, then you should send it to them. The report spam add-in, those submissions are largely automated, so there's not going to be a human at do it looking at them and taking action on them. So if you really want security to get involved, you need to send it to them. Okay, block senders. Like I said, we don't recommend people clicking the mark as junk button, because what happens is people end up with 2,000 block sender lists, and spammers tend to not reuse the same address when in their from. So it's really ineffective to just put every spammer's address in the block senders list, because then you just have this huge unmaintainable list. You'll never get around to printing it because you don't really know if those addresses are still important to keep in there. So we've seen users create very, very large lists, and it's actually caused delivery problems to their accounts. We're still working with Microsoft to determine why that's happening, and we'll try to file bugs as much as we can, but the rule of thumb is we want to encourage people to have a condensed block senders list that's effective. And I think that block senders is most effective for like newsletters that you just can't get unsubscribed from, or maybe you went to some conference and your badge got scanned 100 times, and now you're getting all of this crap, and some of these PR firms are pretty annoying. So that might be a good use case for block senders. And I have a screenshot here of mine, and I went to some conference and I got all these companies I've never really heard of are now spamming me. So it's not technically spam because I did, allow them to scan my badge, and that gave them permission to spam me. Any questions on block senders? Okay. So inbox rules. This is an example of the level of detail I was suggesting to Janet earlier. If you wanted to recreate the custom, the high-level filtering, you may have noticed the ability to use the trigger or the condition called it includes these words in the message header, and what you can do is actually search for message. You can do a full content search on the source of the message. So if there's some header in there that indicates, like in this example I have, if the list owner header contains or is tech partners, then this filter will filter messages only that went through the tech partners list into a folder, for example. I think that's more powerful than using a subject type filter, because sometimes when people reply off list to your message, you don't always want those messages to get filtered out into that folder. So it's more powerful to do it that way. And once you start digging into the headers of your messages, you can create some pretty powerful inbox rules. So Microsoft's filtering is a little different than what we had with the old system. We had Civ before, which is kind of a quasi-programming language. You can still do a lot with Microsoft's inbox rules. So.
But you need to do it specifically for every kind of message. I mean, if you get a lot of ones that say, increase your size kind of messages, it still get through with amazing regularity.
Right. So your question is,
I mean,
it gets cumbersome to create custom rules for like one-off like spam messages that come through.
For all the ones that talk about Viagra or make your woman happy kind of ones. I mean, there's not really a clear single item you can choose as something to filter out without. I mean, your previous algorithms must have done something right. So.
Well, okay, so we're back on the question of, did something change with the transition to Office 365 in terms of spam scanning? If you're getting messages arriving in your inbox that are clearly spam and they're not going away over time, and you're submitting them, take a look at the headers and make sure that they are indeed being misidentified as not spam. Okay. Keep submitting them, keep doing the report spam thing, because that'll cause the messages to get sent to Sophos.
Was that the one you told us not to do, though? Oh, that was Marcus Junk.
Right.
Oh, okay. Report spam.
In either case, we'll send them to Sophos, and if that problem just doesn't go away, we'll look into why. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, you don't want to be creating individual inbox rules for every single spam message you get. I'm talking about things that are like, you get a lot of messages that meet this criteria. Create an inbox rule to put them in a folder or something like that. Or if you wanted to, look for messages that had a spam rating of, 5 stars instead of 4 stars, you could do that too.
We have a question.
Okay, we have a question.
Mary, she's saying she has an account, but she can't block a sender or make it send to Clutter. It uses the same sent from address over and over again. How should she address this problem? So
there's a spammer that's using the same from address, and it's in the blocked senders list.
So she has an account, but she cannot block the sender or make it send to Clutter. So she can't block it or assign it to Clutter. And they use the same account over and over again. So how
Well, I would think that the block senders list would work if the spammer is using the same address over and over again.
So we have some cases where if there are too many block senders in the list, it's not respected.
Okay, so Janine is saying that I mentioned this a little bit earlier with people who have a really large block senders list. It causes it to not work randomly, or is it
It's usually
predictably?
The last one added.
The last one added doesn't work. So we're still trying to figure out the nuance of the behavior. So if this person, Mary, has a large list, that might be the cause. But if this might be an example where she'll want to open a case with us to look at the situation, because maybe she's found some other bug, or maybe there's something subtle that isn't obvious.
She had a follow-up. She asked how can she set a filter for it.
If she asked how to create a custom inbox rule for it, she could look at the message source and look at the headers, and she could look at the from header and verify that the from address is truly consistent between messages, and then use the this condition here. It includes these words in the message header to precisely grab those messages. She might also find by looking at the message source that there is variability in the from address, and that would cause the block senders list to be ineffective. But there might be some other clue in the message, some other predictability in the headers that she could create a custom rule to trigger on if that was really necessary. But all in all, if this is really a problem that's plaguing her, I recommend opening a call. Anything else? Okay. Okay, bulk mail, I just wanted to touch on this because a lot of people consider bulk mail spam, but it's like those newsletters I was talking about earlier, or what is that thing we get from the UW police, the Badger Beat? A lot of people consider that spam, and technically it's not. It's because I don't know. It's kind of this gray area. I've been experimenting a little bit with Microsoft's internal scanning of bulk mail. They set a bulk confidence level, BCL, similar to SCL, and if you look at the headers of the messages, you'll see that they're rating them between 1 and 10 or something like that. So I created a custom inbox rule to filter anything that has a high bulk confidence level to a folder. And there's a screenshot there of what I did. And it does catch some stuff, but it's definitely not. I don't know if I want to risk. After the presentation, I'll show a screenshot of it, of my bulk folder.
Is the higher the number, the more bulky it is?
Yeah, the higher the number, the more bulky it is. It really only catches like 4 messages a week for me, and half of them are legitimate, and half of those are from UW. So you definitely don't want to be filtering those into your trash. But if you just want to separate kind of the bulkiness of your mail into a different folder, that might be a good option, especially for people who are just plagued with these newsletters and things like that.
Jesse, here's a follow-up from Marie again. She wants to know where to set up the filters. Where does she set them?
Okay. She wants to know how to set them up. I think I should probably do a demo, but I'm really worried that if I switch off the slide, we're going to lose our feed.
Mm-hmm.
So how about we do it at the end? Do all the demos at the end? Does that work? Okay, so can you make a note that I should do a demo? Yes?
If you make a filter, there's a bunch of things are bulk, but there's one particular bulk that you do want. Can you make the equivalent of a whitelist to let that particular bulk mail through? Like, say you only want Badger Beat to come through, but not all the other stuff? Is that possible? Because I can see 2 lists having the same bulk rating, but one you want and one you don't.
Okay, so the question is, can you create a custom rule like this that filters bulk, but then have an exception list for specific messages? I'm not entirely sure the best way to do it. You could try the safe safe senders list. That might work, but I'm not sure.
What's the order
I don't know.
processing? Is it safe sender, then spam, then bulk, then?
That's a good question, what the order of processing is. Does anyone else know?
I've gotten completed response from Microsoft on that, so I'm not sure that we do them.
Okay, so it might require some experimentation.
There is the additional option to, I think by default, when you create a rule, it wants to stop processing other rules after. Perhaps if you uncheck that, just
Find out what
guessing.
order the rules are in?
Right.
So yeah, Jacob suggested trying the checkbox to stop processing.
Uncheck the checkbox.
Uncheck the checkbox, the one at the bottom. When you're, I'll show it in the demo when we're done here. To stop processing more messages when this rule triggers.
But within
Or
within your collection of bulk mail rules, or for that matter, your junk mail rules, is it processed top to bottom as seen in the list here?
I think it's processed. Yeah,
Top to bottom.
fairly sure that the order of processing for inbox rules is top to bottom. I think that's a safe bet. Janine looks skeptical.
Well, it makes a big difference when you're making your rules to, yeah.
That's just the way it's supposed to be processed.
Yeah, Microsoft can be a little unpredictable, so. Okay. Clutter. So Clutter is a little different. It uses behavioral learning. It's not the same for everyone. And it really, so the way it works is it supposedly learns from your behavior. So if you're the type of person who deletes your mail immediately after getting it, it'll think that those messages must not be important, so it moves those into Clutter. We don't really know the full extent of how their algorithm works. We just can kind of infer how it works. But what they're trying to do is identify messages that aren't as important and move those messages out of your inbox and put them in Clutter. Some people I've heard like it. Some people I heard hate it. So it really comes down to your preference. In theory, what you're supposed to do is train it by moving messages in and out of Clutter. I've heard that works for some people, but it doesn't work for others. And I think we've heard a rumor that Microsoft might be changing the way Clutter behaves in the future. Pat, I think you mentioned that, right?
Yeah, right now it does just learn. It just follows your instructions. So somebody like me who tends to dispense with a lot of messages in the preview pane of a thick client, it assumed that just because I was reading them and throwing them away, it assumed that they should all be thrown away from that point on. So Clutter had to be turned off in my case. But Microsoft's getting a lot of feedback, and overall usage of Clutter is not particularly high.
Yeah.
And so they want to modify it, so they've been trying to study how people use it and expect it to change.
Yeah, so it might change in the future. I think what I heard you mention was that they were thinking about moving it more towards what Google does with their priority inbox. Yeah. So we'll see what they throw at us, and we'll do our best to make sure users are well informed of any changes they make. We did notice a few cases where users, probably in an attempt to turn off Clutter, they deleted their Clutter folder, and that caused messages to bounce. Messages that were bound for Clutter then bounced back to the sender. That caused a bit of a problem.
Someone did delete their Clutter folder.
You'll need to recreate it, or toggle the Clutter option in your preferences in order to fix it.
Turn it on and then turn it off again?
Yeah, if you turn it, if you just cycle it one time, it'll create the Clutter folder.
Okay.
So yeah, just keep that in mind if someone attempts to do that. That's how you fix it. All right. Any questions on Clutter? Okay. Phishing. There's really not much to say about this. I'm sure everyone's aware of phishing. We catch a lot of compromised accounts, so we know our users are getting phished, and the accounts are being used mostly, as far as we can tell, the ones we catch anyway are used for spamming outbound from our system to other universities and other places like that. So we know our users are actively targeted for phishing. We obviously do our best to detect when phishing messages come in and filter them to junk, but we can't catch everything, especially those. We have seen examples of messages highly targeted at individuals. So there's spear phishing going on. So if you have individuals that are working with sensitive data, you should make sure that they're well aware of phishing and can identify it. Oh, and the first point I had on the slide there was that since they already have compromised accounts on our system, they can use those accounts to craft new messages to target at other users on our system, and they can just try different variants of their phish to get one that gets through to the inbox. So even if we had all the greatest spam scanning appliances in the world in front of our system, they could eventually craft a message to get through undetected and phish anyone they wanted to on campus. So it's really important that we stress end user diligence in the meantime until some sort of miracle magic anti-phishing technique is invented. All right, any questions on phishing? Malware is very similar. We obviously only scan messages during delivery if the message is detected. If a signature for a Trojan is pushed out 5 minutes after the message is delivered, it's already in your inbox. It's not going to get rescanned again. So at that point, the user will be relying on their endpoint antivirus solution for detection, and that happens at the point of access of the file. So there's a little bit more time for if there's a 0-day threat or something. If the user doesn't check their mail right away, then hopefully their endpoint antivirus has a chance to catch up. That's pretty much it. That's the summary. We can go right to questions, and I can do a demo. Does anyone have any specific questions?
Well, I have a question on the opposite side is the allowed senders list.
Okay.
I noticed that you can't put start at list.edu or list.edu or your own domain, but I can put in someone else's domain, say doit.list.edu in that field.
So in the allowed list, you want to put a whole domain in there, and you want it to be allow everything.
I found stuff from my own department in my junk list.
Well, I wouldn't recommend putting whisk.edu.
No,
Right. Right, for good reason, because spammers will forge that address, and then you'll get a lot of spam in your inbox. So I don't think the allow list is whitelisting an entire domain is not a good idea. I wouldn't recommend that. So I think
you can't even put an individual at that domain.
So is the issue that you have individuals from within domains hosted by Office 365 ending up in the junk mail?
Yes.
Okay, so sometime in the last, say, 6 months, I believe, Microsoft has changed the behavior of what addresses get added to your block sender list. So previously, it was possible for you to accidentally mark an email from a coworker as junk and have their email address added to your block sender list. That is no longer possible. They've changed that behavior. So if you have list.edu addresses in your block sender list, that's probably from legacy behavior of junk mail. And you should be able to delete them and have them not come back. So I would say the appropriate technique would be to delete those senders from your block sender list, not add all of list.edu.
But they weren't in the block sender list.
That would be allowed senders list.
Okay, so you're saying they were given a high spam rating, their emails were given a high spam rating, and that's why they were ended up in junk?
I didn't look at the spam rating.
Okay, so there are a couple different ways that they can end up in junk. I mean, you mark it as junk, it's in block senders, or the email itself receives a high spam rating.
Okay.
So
all right, so messages from my department administrator were appearing in my junk mail.
Mhm.
Okay, and so if I attempted to put her in my allowed senders list, it said no because it's part of the domain of the.
Right, so we have the same logic is applied to allowed sender as block sender. It's not, you're not allowed to put those addresses into those lists.
Okay, so just to recap for the online audience, we have a situation where messages from within a department, the secretary in this case, are being filtered into junk, and your attempt to put that user's address in the allowed safe senders list, right here's the example, it won't let you do that. So I think what Janine was saying, that Microsoft by design doesn't allow you to add addresses within the domain within our system to safe senders, and that the ultimate root cause of that we should look into. It might be because at some point in the past, Microsoft allowed you to add that person's address to block senders inadvertently, but after that, Microsoft has changed that behavior to not allow that to happen. And another reason why we don't want people to use the mark as junk button is because people inadvertently mark messages from their people they actually want to converse with as junk, and that adds that address to block senders, and now every message from that person gets put into junk.
But if you look in block senders, you'll see it. So you
You should. So I think you should take a look at your block senders. What?
So I could use a rule.
A rule might work. But if the messages from this person are going in the junk, we should figure out why. You could look at the headers.
Yeah, no.
You create a understand too.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is if some spammer decided to do mail administrator at doit.wis.edu and spam everyone, trying to get them to give up their password, there's no way we could block mail administrator at doit.wis.edu, even though we know that's a spammer's address.
Yeah, if a spammer forged mail administrator at doit.wis.edu, end users, from what I understand, are not allowed to add that address to their block list. I'm not too concerned about that because the next time they do it, they won't use that same address again. So that address will be ineffective in their block list. And
Phishers do though.
Well,
Sometimes
they'll reuse the address, but there's so many different possibilities for addresses, they'll just pick something else. I think that issue should be addressed at the global level to make sure that we catch that type of phishing campaign for everyone instead of requiring individuals to maintain large block lists. Here's for those people who don't know how to look at the source of a message, here's how you can do it in the web client. Just right-click on the message and select message details. It's kind of in a compact view here. You can copy and paste it into a text editor if you want. So here you can see the spam report. This message was rated as 17% not spam, but I filtered it into the bulk mail folder using that VCL. Let's see if I can find that.
You can Control plus the browser.
No, I tried expanding the size.
Control plus doesn't work on that particular window.
Oh, and here's an interesting thing too. This was actually sent to one of my old email addresses, and Microsoft likes to when it displays your address, it'll automatically translate your alternate address into your primary. But if you look at the message details, you can actually see the original address it was sent to. So you could potentially create a custom rule that triggers on messages sent to my old address I never use anymore, do something different with it.
We have a question.
Yes.
From Dave Karnowski. He wants to know, is there a system-wide whitelist? To say that his department is working with a vendor on some bulk mailing. and they're requesting a whitelist, what do they need to do? Or what does the department need to do?
So the question is there a system-wide whitelist? If they're working with some third-party company, can those messages get whitelisted? Yes, we do that on occasion. It really depends on the circumstances. Like there's one company that sends out tax forms. We whitelist them. We prefer to whitelist by IP address. Make sure that the sending everything from that IP address is considered not spam. A lot of times they'll request that we whitelist by email address, but that can be forged easily, so we don't allow that. If people are asking for whitelisting just because there's a few, they're worried that messages might get rated as spam, that's not something we'll really consider, because it's pretty common for, if our system happens to be rating messages spam, that means that other systems out there, Gmail and all the other recipient systems for those messages are also going to consider those messages spam. So in those situations, we like to work with the customer to ensure that there's not something about their messages that are triggering the spam heuristics. Maybe there's their domain got on a bunch of blacklists. Maybe their website is compromised and serving up malware or something like that. And we'd really like to boil down to the root cause of the issue. So the answer to the question is it depends. We'll do it in some cases. In other cases, we'll just try to figure out what the root cause is.
It's also important to note that just simply whitelisting does not guarantee delivery to an end user's inbox. I mean, we can whitelist them, but as Jesse pointed out, other systems, and we know a lot of users who forward may not be. So if we would have marked it as spam, it's likely they would have, and it won't be delivered.
Right, okay, so Janine mentioned that even if we whitelist the messages at the system level, there might be other reasons for the messages to be filtered into junk, so we can't guarantee delivery if the end user has specified those messages to go into junk. Did we have a question earlier about how to create a rule?
Yes, filter.
Yes, okay. Well, hopefully they saw me browse how to get to it. It's in the inbox and sweep rules here. So they just click the plus button to create a new one. Condition, the example I had was it includes these words in the message header. So, and here's where you could just copy and paste from the headers, something like that. Well, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but whatever pattern you're trying to match on, and then hit the plus button, and then hit OK. And then for the action, you can move the message is usually what people end up doing. You could forward it or whatever. And then this is the option that Jacob mentioned earlier, to stop processing more rules. So if you wanted the message processing to continue on so that multiple things could happen to that message, you would uncheck that box. And we are presuming that the order of the inbox rules is honored by Microsoft, and I think for the most part that's the way it works.
Yeah, that's what they claim. They'll process them in the order that they're given.
Yeah, that's what they claim.
Specific order.
Anyone else want to see a demo?
What does sweep mean?
Sweep. Does anyone know?
Rules. Break the word.
To be honest, I am not familiar with sweep. Can anyone else like to explain sweep?
So we'll actually do some further research on what sweep rules are and send that out to the UWIT Collab Tools Office 365 group. Okay. And any questions that you've asked and we didn't fully answer, we're going to look into them and send them out to the Office 365 group.
And here's, I'm actually showing my bulk folder, the messages that Microsoft take as bulk, And you can see like a few of them are like newsletters or some quasi spam I got added to. But I got a message from a mailing list that shouldn't have gone there. Office 365 messages are considered bulk, ironically. So, but they're talking about Yammer, so maybe that's questionable. All right, anything else? Yes.
So I know that we're supposed to go into Outlook or Outlook with that and mark as spam using the plugin we talked about, but I'm pretty sure that doesn't always happen. I have a lot of users that don't use Windows, and I'm one of them most of the time. So, you know, marking a spam message means I gotta fire up Outlook web app or Windows. It takes a while. And so sometimes I just drop spam into the junk folder, which I know I'm not supposed to do, but it's so easy. What are the consequences of that? Does it have any effect at all?
Right, so the question is for if you're not on Outlook or using the web client, there's no option to mark the messages as spam. Does moving the message to junk mail folder do anything? It does not do training of anything. It doesn't. If you want to just move your junk in there, it's fine. You can do that. But another option, which will work with any client, is to forward the message. And let me.
Oh, that's right. The report dash thing.
Yeah, I'll show you. Forward. And if you're using Thunderbird or a similar client, I recommend using a forwarding as an attachment, because that'll forward it as the raw RFC 822 copy of the message.
Okay.
Outlook and other clients will mangle the message in ways that aren't as useful. So.
You can't redirect.
Well, you could redirect using a plugin in Thunderbird. You will get I think you'll get a forging.
Redirecting is blocked somehow.
Yeah, well, we're clamping down on forging, similar to spammers are forging addresses, and we need to clamp down on it. So we're working on it. Someday we'll get to the panacea where people can't forge. But anyway, if you're an authenticated user and you try to send as from an address that you're not authorized to send as, we'll block that. We won't allow that. And so the redirect, if you're using SMTP auth to send the messages as your SMTP server and you try to use the redirect plugin for Thunderbird, those messages won't go through unless you're specifically authorized to send as from that address. So, yeah, you're right. That might not work.
All right. So forwarding to
Yeah. Did everyone see that?
So this plugin for Outlook, is this something we have to download? The reporter spam plugin?
No, it's the report spam plugin add-in is enabled for everyone by default.
No, but in Outlook.
It's enabled in Outlook for everyone too. It's enabled. It works with both Outlook and the web client.
Okay, so we don't have to install anything or activate anything on our client in order
Right.
to make that available. Okay.
And we do know that it's a little less reliable on Outlook than it is on the web. There's some sort of timing issue with the way Outlook does HTTP requests or something like that. We're not really sure exactly why it's less reliable. Hopefully we'll improve it over time. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for attending. We will be posting the YouTube video in the UWIT Collaterals group. So if you'd like to share this video with anyone, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, that's all.
And also the PowerPoint.
Yep, I'll send out the PowerPoint as well.
Okay.